Okay, guys, welcome back. So we're going to roll straight into the next presentation. So up next we've got Gary Maitland. So a little bit on Gary here. Played at London Towers as a junior. We actually played against each other for numerous years. Gary used to get the best of me most of the time. Gary's a professional skills coach. You know, he's worked with players in the NBA, WNBA, EuroLeague, Eurocup, ACB, numerous leagues throughout Europe. Gary's worked with brands such as Nike, Jordan, Red Bull, Sky Sports, Mega Slam Hoops, just to name a few. And he's going to do his presentation today on modern day skill development. So can we give a hand to Gary here, please?
Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. So just kind of a little bit of a deeper background into what I've experienced or who I've been able to learn from. It was pre-COVID, but like 2016 to 19, I was mentored by Drew Hanlon of Pure Sweat, who is the skills trainer for multiple NBA superstars. In fact, right now is probably the hottest period for him. So being around him and his clients, 5-6 years ago, really kind of has shown me now over time the results that he's been able to do with his athletes. So for me, that kind of insight was like, wow, I've never seen stuff like this before. So things I'm going to share with you today are going to be stuff that I've seen Jason Tatum do live. I've seen Joel Embiid do live. And that kind of, that went quite deep into my soul when I saw that stuff happen. So I will be sharing that with you. More recently, I've teamed up with Impact Basketball, which is an organization based in Las Vegas. So last year I did pre-draft with 22 athletes that entered the draft last year. And again, that was another eye-opening experience about how they prepare players for the draft. So that was pretty cool. So a lot of my learning has been based around kind of the Western side, with a sprinkle over kind of more European style as well. And I guess it's an amalgamation of both to try and make sense of the British game and how I can support athletes over here. So currently working with a number of professional players, collegiate athletes and high-level juniors. And I can say that we've got a very exciting off-season that's going to start. We had a really exciting one last year. And it's something that I'm really passionate about is the player development, skill development. These 3 months in the summer are absolutely crucial since during the season it's probably a little bit harder to work on those things. So, let's get started. But I think the main thing for me is about players getting a buy-in. You can't really do much unless an athlete buys into your tutelage, your guidance, your coaching. True story, I won't name the player, but player walked in, it was very early days, maybe even like day 2 when we started working out. And me with my ego, I was like, I'm going to fix his shot, right? I'm going to like correct it, I'm going to improve it, I'm going to tweak it. And I mentioned something about his hand position on the ball, and I immediately got shut down. He was like, I like it like this. And it was at that moment when I realized, I was like, do you know what? I'm not going to have that conversation right now. I haven't developed that trust between us. He doesn't understand why I would like to change it. All I did was just come in and was like, right, you need to do this, you need to do this. And it just didn't make sense to him. So that taught me a valuable lesson that the skill of being a skills trainer or a player development coach, whatever the title is to try and get the buy-in, help them understand why or how you're going to help them improve, add a 0 onto the end of their contract, or how they're going to get a scholarship to the US, or whatever it is. Just make the team, get the buy-in, and then the magic can start to happen. I guess the flip side to that is that if you get the players to buy in, but we're teaching things or concepts that don't have much value, then we're potentially wasting their time. So we've got to be really smart and understanding of what is it that's going to be of high value, what are the priorities, what do they want to achieve, how are we going to maximize our time together to get the best results for these athletes, not just for those 90 minutes, 75 minutes that we've got for them, but after 3 months of a summer program or after 5 years, 10 years of working together. So the buy-in is crucial. I'll give you an example of maybe a low-value item. Let's say 2 ball dribbling. right? Let's say 2-ball dribbling, for example. No doubt that you can improve a player's coordination with dribbling 2 balls at the same time. You can definitely make a player feel more confident in dribbling 2 balls at the same time, and that confidence may carry into many other aspects of their game, their lives, and I think there's definitely a tick there, right? That's a good job. But that's looking at it from a very kind of like, macro perspective. If we start to look at things in a little bit more micro, we can start to see whether or not those things actually translate to games. And that's something that I really take pride on, is trying to make sure that everything I do, when I ask myself the question, what's the point? Why do we do this? That I have an answer. And if I don't have an answer, I need to find it. And if I can't find it, then probably I'm wasting my time and everybody else's time. 2 balls is the one that kind of just sticks out to my mind. There is a place for it, no doubt. But if we're asking players to be able to handle a high-pressure situation in a pick and roll, I don't know that that's actually going to have much benefit at all. So I would probably spend more time on recreating those scenarios to help them handle those kind of pressures with ball handling, as opposed to using the 2 balls. And there's many other examples, but that's definitely the one. The tools that can stand the test of pressure are definitely the things that athletes need to have. So the 5 kind of key areas that I prioritize, number 1 is definitely shooting. Shooting is definitely a high priority on any kind of workout that I do. Usually we start with that. I kind of scrapped what seemed to be quite a default way of going through a workout. Kind of do ball handling and then you do a bunch of other things. Ball handling seemed to be the main thing that you started with. And that's not what I wanted to focus on. That didn't sit well with me. It didn't make sense for the athletes. Shooting was the thing where I was like, that's what we're going to do. So shooting, I would put like number 1 as the priority. It's definitely one of the 5. The other one is being able to handle pressure. What does that mean? There's so many examples of where the pressure is, and that would be bespoke to the player. But handling pressure is definitely another one. The third one is being able to finish at the rim. The 4th one is on-ball defense, and underpinning all of those is decision making. So for me, in my sessions, they need to kind of tick those 5 boxes. And being able to pitch that level is probably the hardest part to start out, is where do we go? Well, I don't think going from, if a skill was graded from 1 to 10, 1 being the most basic, 10 being the most complex, I don't think it makes sense to go in at 1 if they're already a 7. So being able to pitch the place at which that kind of activity needs to sit is definitely something that needs to be thought through. But you could pitch it anywhere. But the real skill is then saying, okay, well, if they're finding it too easy and they're experiencing too much success or it's too easy, then we have to have something in the bag ready that makes it a bit more complex. So then we can start going up. And likewise, if it's more difficult, we've got to be able to adjust and go back down. So pitching the skill is really important. And sometimes that just comes down to setting up a conditioned practice and just letting them play. And then reverse engineering it from there. So if we were saying, let's play one-on-one, we could literally just check it up, or maybe there could be, a V-cut with a pass, catch, and then play, and then let's see what the problems are. Let's see what the problems are. And I think this is where skill development is starting to go a little bit more, is trying to problem solve rather than showing off the trainer or the coach's ego about what he or she knows. And that's something that I've learned over the years. I remember finding new drills. It was all about drills, all about drills. It was all about, let me get the speed ladder out. Let me dribble balls while I'm doing footwork on the speed ladder. Let me grab the tennis balls. Let me just show off with everything that I've learned and I've seen and I've done. And it just didn't have much value, didn't have much purpose. So for me, it's more important that we see the players play and then start having that dialogue with the athlete and figuring out, okay, well, how are we going to be more successful? And the biggest question is what are we trying to achieve? Asking the player, what do you want to achieve? Let me get one of you, please. Do you want to do that again, but sprint?
Oh, sprint.
Let's sprint. Awesome, good job. So let's say I've got my defender, I've got the ball right here, And the objective for me at this point, let's say as I'm trying to get to the rim, is to get from here to here, ultimately, right? That's what we're trying to achieve. So we've got to figure out ways of doing that. So it's less about moves. I could probably write a list of a whole bunch of dribbling moves and things that we could do, and there's probably 5 or 6 names for different actions. But ultimately, the concept is I need to get from here to here, aiming to get my nose to the front of the rim so I can finish on either side. And how am I going to do that? So one of the things is going to be, right, well, I don't want to be on the spot dribbling, because if I start to go around the player, he's obviously going to start bumping me off, and then my drives end up going too wide. Okay, so the idea of dribbling outside the hips, or being, just stand still, yeah? Being able to get from here to here so I get this straight line is definitely like my first step on how to strategically beat someone one-on-one. Let's get one ball between two. Tell him to sprint. Everyone. One ball between two, and you can just stand opposite each other. So instead of prescribing some dribble moves, we speak about this concept of getting outside the hips. So we're just going to work laterally. Normally there are like 5,000 different lines on the court. So let's just pick like the three-point line. You can pick the halfway line. Just find a line and treat it like there's a glass pane in front of you and you can't cross it, right? So player with the ball, I just want you shifting laterally side to side, maybe about 2 or 3 meters, like don't go crazy like down the court. Defender without the ball, all you've got to do is stay nose to belly button, all right? You've got 15 seconds, go. And freeze. Cool. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, right, how can we make some of these players more efficient with their movement? So number one, I would say is, and there's 2 keys that I saw as I scanned the room. Number one is that sometimes they're dribbling and their feet are lateral, their feet are flat, right? So that tells me they're not in an attack mode. So the small adjustment I would make is that if you've got the ball on your right hand, that you're dropping your left foot back so your right foot is leaning forward. So this puts you in a standing sprint start position ready to attack downhill. So as they're being shifty, we're trying to maintain this position. As it goes to the left, it switches. So they're in that sprint start position ready to attack downhill. Let's do another 15 seconds. Let's go. Freeze. Cool, so the next thing I'm seeing is that some of the guys out here, as they cross the ball over, they're cross-stepping. They're cross-stepping. Now, they haven't achieved anything with the cross-step. They're just using it to move laterally. The problem is with doing that is now you're giving up one way. So now going back the other way, there's more of a twist and a turn. So we're not very efficient here. So we kind of want to stay in that attack mode, and it's more of a skip rather than cross-stepping. Why? Because I think the cross-step that we need is when we go downhill and we're using the cross-step as a way of protecting the ball as well, as that's on the inside. You got that? So no cross-steps and be in that sprint start position. Ready? Go. Freeze. And the next layer I would say is that defense isn't live, so they're not trying to steal it, so they won't appreciate it right now. But if we go live, I would imagine some of these basketballs are going to be stolen. Why? Because the ball is just bouncing straight across. So being able to dribble the ball back to the pocket, back to the hip, is then going to keep it nice and protected back here. We got that? Shall I demo that real quick? Can I get that ball, please? Right, so this is what you're going to do. So from here, it's going back to the pocket, back to the pocket. Back. Got it? All right, 15 seconds. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. And freeze. Cool. So defense is finding it really easy now to kind of just match their movement. So I want you to be a bit more shifty and use choppy steps to create more of a distance. For example, Amali, you're going to try and stay in front of me now. Okay, so this is what we were doing. We were doing this, right? But as soon as I do this, I'm now getting a lot wider so I can attack downhill. Okay? A common question I get asked is, with that move right there, why isn't that a travel? And the answer is, well, you can't travel while you're dribbling the ball. So you can take as many steps as you want while you're dribbling. You ready? 15 seconds. Go. And freeze. Awesome. Thank you very much. You can just come and sit down again. Appreciate you guys. So that kind of like freestyle nature with a little bit of pressure is definitely going to create a little bit of a different challenge, isn't it, than kind of setting them up with prescribed dribble patterns and dribble routines. They're now doing a lot more thinking. There's a lot more concepts about protection of the ball, about trying to achieve a goal, which is to get outside the hips and get downhill. So do that, which we can then kind of condition it up and then create a one-on-one going downhill so they can go finish. And we can have all kind of point systems just to trick them into working a little bit harder. But these are the kind of things that I will work with athletes to make sure that, one, it's not boring, it's a little bit fun, but also we're trying to maximize the movement so that we get the desired outcome, which is going to be, how do I get my nose to the front of the rim with the defender in front of me to start with? Yeah. One big thing that I noticed when being around a lot of the NBA training was around the physicality when it comes to handling pressure. So can you send me a ball, please? And a defender. So one really major key was around being in this sprint start and having this inside hand up, because this would act as like a paddle to swipe off any hand that was coming in to try and steal the ball. This was such a significant moment for me where I was like, we're not teaching this, right? This is not something that's taught. And now if we start looking at the detail, we can see that a lot of players are doing it. And it's a way of just making sure that we're not losing or we're not getting a disadvantage because of this defender trying to bump us as we go. So now we can start adding in that as I'm going outside the hips, this hand is coming up. Let me face you guys. Here, you can come right here. So as I'm going outside the hips, this hand is coming up. Let me grab another one. So that when I attack downhill and just reach for it, okay, I'm using this hand as a paddle just to swipe it off. This was huge. This was a big game changer for me because it just wasn't taught. Another thing about the physicality as well is about initiating contact with bumps. So the second dribble bump is a really interesting concept. The second dribble bump is meaning that I'm using my first dribble when I go downhill to get hip to hip. And then the second dribble is to bump, to initiate that contact. Now doing that is, if you just stand right here, really important to understand for two reasons. One, obviously we don't want to make an offensive foul by doing this. This is going to obviously go against us. And for the point of being on balance, we don't want to lead with the shoulder either, because if he pulled the chair from underneath us, then I've completely lost balance. So the best way to bump is that I go down on my dribble and then I bump and lift up as I create the contact. And this was something that was like, wow, players are really creating a significant advantage with initiating and establishing this contact. It's huge. And as long as that defender is on your hip when doing this, there's no danger of any foul being called. None whatsoever. As soon as I start extending out my arms, or if I start leaning with my shoulder, then fair enough. But staying within my frame so that the ball goes down, I go down, and then I bump and lift up on the move, allowed that separation to happen, which meant finishing at the rim was a lot easier. Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. So The handling pressure, being able to work on certain ball handling drills that meant it was closely aligned with some of the actions that we saw in the game, was all of a sudden becoming a huge feature in my workouts. It was less about just the moves and more about the concepts. And if there was ever a situation where it was like, oh, players aren't quite getting it, then the conversation would go back to what we're trying to achieve. What do you want out of this? And if they're able to articulate that, then we can start having that dialogue and start problem solving about what needs to happen next. Any questions so far on handling pressure? Cool. Please do save your questions, because I would rather talk less and go deeper into anything that you want to know, rather than me guessing about what I think you want to know, if that makes sense, yeah? So that was handling pressure. Shooting is something that I've changed a lot over the years as well. So early years of a coach, and some of you may be able to empathize with this, the acronym BEEF was around. I can't even remember what it stood for, and I'm glad I've forgotten, but it was such a very basic level of understanding what a jump shot should contain. So then I started like thinking and hearing all these things about your hand needs to be doing this and your feet need to be doing that, and there were so many boxes to tick that it would just be crazy to try and teach a player to shoot from the ground up. So again, reverse engineering just became the biggest theme for how to help someone with their jump shot. Everybody has a jump. They all have their own jump shot, and it's all very personal to them. Passing isn't very personal to a player. They don't feel precious about what their passing looks like, but every player probably feels quite precious about their jump shot. So you've got to tread very carefully when talking to them about it. But once they're okay with having that conversation about a jump shot, you just want to look at it. That's it. You just want to look. And then you can start thinking, well, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve that ball to go high enough so that it drops into the hoop from a high angle. For example, you guys do this as well. Just make a circle with your fingers and thumb. If you don't want to look like an idiot, you don't have to do it. But if your face is the basketball and you hold it at eye level, right? Can you see a circle? Right? You can't see a circle. So that's the ball trying to go in, which is a flat shot. It's going to hit the front of the rim. So as soon as we drop the hoop a little bit more, or my head certainly can't go any higher, we can start to see the circle take shape, right? And that's what the ball sees. So we want the ball to be able to see that drop angle so it gets the swish. Why am I saying that? Because that is one of the objectives, is to get that ball high so that it drops into the hoop. That's part one. Part two is it shouldn't be going to the left or to the right. Now, if we can figure out those two things, then it's more likely that we're going to get the swishes. So by reverse engineering it, you just look at a player's shot. Let's do this. Let's get 3 of you, please. Not you. You made 3 out of 4 earlier. Go over here. Shoot that. Go rebound. You're the passer. And Marley, you're the shooter. So just, yeah, you got it. So rebound, passer, shooter. Just keep going. Go on, keep non-stop. You're probably going to shoot about 50. So I'd be looking at a player's shot. You got it? And I'd be seeing, okay, well, is it going high enough so that it can drop and get the swish? Or is there an issue with it going left or to the right? Now, the immediate thing that I can see, you probably can't see it from the stands, is how the ball is rotating, which is telling me that his hand is probably slightly onto the side. Like that. Now, obviously, some of the shots are going to go in. This is not saying that a player would never be able to score with their own shot. We could probably kick it in, and it would go in a few times. But we want to be able to be a bit more efficient. Freeze. Freeze. So what we would do to slow a Marley shot down is really start talking about the hand placement so that it's less on the side, so that we get that pure spin going on. That's something visual that I'd be trying to encourage him to look for. People are kind of split in whether or not they shoot and track the ball with their eyes, or whether they keep their eyes focused on the rim. For me, I think that you get a lot of information if you look at the ball. Like once it's left your hand, whether you're still looking at the hoop or the ball, I think you get more out of looking at the ball. You can get a lot of feedback. So for me, the feedback is going to be the rotation. Okay, you want to take a few more? Freeze. So my tweak for Marley would be that when he catches it, he's catching it here. And when he catches it here like this, there's some movement that needs to happen in order for his hand to get right in front of his nose, right down his line of sight, and be able to get that ball going exactly to where his eyes can see. So we want to be able to catch that ball, get it right to our belly button, and ideally we want to have the middle of our hand running right through the middle of our body and our face. Now the middle of our hands is going to change from person to person, but, well, spoiler, the middle finger is not the middle of your hand. It's the middle finger, but it's not the middle of your hand. Because if you were to hold your hand out like this, you can see that the thumb stretches further than the little finger. So the idea is that with your hand on the ball, if you just tilt it and rotate it, you can start to see that when your thumb and your little finger are equal across and form that straight line, that's probably where you want to be. Most of the population are going to be split between the index and the middle, and some are even with the index finger alone as the middle. So finding that out for a player is really important, because then they can start to really feel at one with the contact with the ball. Yeah? Where's your middle of the hand? Cool. So when you shoot that ball, I want you to feel that. Yeah? Go. One more. Cool, and freeze. So, cool. It takes time. It's not gonna happen in 3 minutes, all right? But these are some of the things that we need to focus on. And the more that I can get Amali to buy into that concept, the more he's gonna go away and work on it. Another thing I noticed, and this will be the last thing I say on Amali's shooting form, is the rotation of the hips when he jumps. So as he jumps, there's a slight rotation where he lands this way. So any kind of movement going like this is potentially going to have a negative impact on your form. In fact, a study was done, and there's various drops in percentage, but without a doubt, the rotation of the hips or jumping wide and landing narrow had a 20% drop in shooting performance. That's 20% at NBA level. So any level underneath is going to be similar or probably even more significant. So having your feet wider, sticking that landing so they land wide, catch it, belly button, feel that index finger and middle finger. Let's do it. Make one. And stop there. Perfect. Give me a round of applause. That was quite intense. Good job, Amali. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, so I'd say the biggest theme here, and I know I'm about to wrap up and take some questions, but for me, being able to reverse engineer the skill of what a player has right now, this moment, is probably the best way to attack how we're going to develop a skill in a player, is by reverse engineering what you see and helping them understand, well, what is the goal, what's the outcome, the desired outcome, and then helping them make those small tweaks. We can talk about thumb flicks and all this. The bottom line is, if there is a thumb flick, but it doesn't affect the shot going left or to the right, leave it alone. Leave it alone. If there is an effect because of that thumb flick, then we need to address it. I've spoken way too much. Can I take any questions? Even from players if you want. Have you turned it off and on again?
I'll try that. Watch it work. 1, 2.
Mic drop.
Do you want a coaching session on microphones?
Have we got any questions for Gary? Can you come down if you can and just speak into the mic? That'd be great.
Hello, this is not so much for Gary, but for Amari. Thank you. When you were told you had to change your shot, how did that affect you?
How did it affect me?
Yeah.
It just more kind of focus. It didn't affect me too bad. I just have to move on and try to find out the right shot for me. So it didn't affect me like mentally in such ways, but sometimes it's difficult physically to change it. But when you practice, obviously, helps you to achieve. Once you change the jump shot, you can feel it and you're like, okay, make sure my hips don't stand as much. So you try to stay straight as possible. And it did feel better.
Hi.
From Ollie or? Okay.
I was going to ask if you could go over those 5 pillars you mentioned at the beginning. I think the first I got was handling pressure and shooting, and just go through
Yep.
those again.
Shooting, handling pressure, finishing at the rim, on-ball defense, decision-making underpins all of that.
Hi. You talked about handling pressure. Do you have to make adjustments depending on the sort of defender they'll face, whether they're longer, quicker, and also when it comes to double teams? Like, how does that shift and change?
Yeah. So the first 2 things that pop out into my mind would be, let me get one of the taller players, please. Whoever's the tallest. So if I was driving and a ball. Thank you. So I guess step 1, if you like, or layer 1 on finishing at the rim would be to teach the mini hook. Defenders on your hip, being able to finish like this without any kind of rotation. With his size and athleticism, I need to tweak that because that's going to be a block shot. So the veer finish is where your last step bumps across, sends this player into a different direction, and then you can recline as you jump, gives you that separation. So to me, that fits under the umbrella of handling pressure in that moment. So that would be one of the tweaks that I would change if you're being guarded against somebody who has the length or athleticism. Yeah. Against the double team, could you just be out on there? So let's say the ball was passed into the post. Just pretend you're the defender actually on the wing. Turn around and guard. Yeah, that one. If the double team was to come from the wing, then it would be about, well, I don't want to stay here. I actually want to start dribbling the ball a little bit lower. Now, when I start doing that, that creates a lot of distance that he would have to recover to get back to the shooter. So what would usually happen, let's do this again. So the ball comes into me, double team comes, I come back, he has to get back, and then that's when I can find a move that goes to the middle. So that would be like another way that I would handle the double team. Yeah? Cool. Thank you. Yeah, you can say that.
In terms of the skill development, you talked about sort of like the 5 fundamentals. I'm just wondering how you find, I mean, for example, I coach a team of under 18s, when you've got, you know, a range from like a 5'10" skinny point guard to like 6'8" shoot center in terms of, say with 3-point shooting, which is something everybody should be able to do. How do you adjust when you're coaching a group of players with wildly different physical attributes?
The skill is in the organization of managing the groups, right? So there's 2 ways you could tackle it. You could either go group the players together who are a similar skill level and progress them on together so that you could spend time addressing maybe a lower level group or advancing them. That's one way you could do it. The other way you could do it is through kind of peer coaching, right? So you could start matching them together so that when your eyes are off helping another group, that now that other player is helping the weaker player. So that would be like two strategies that I would do. But without a doubt, and Drew Hannon, this is a quote from him, he said, when you walk into the gym and you watch players play, you see either what you've taught or what you've allowed. So take that as you want. But basically, like, you know, you want to create a culture where you're able to help groups, even if you're not paying attention to them, but you're helping one particular group, progress them. You know you'll get to them eventually, but go deep with this group, solve some issues, and then move on, or create a culture where they're helping each other.
Hi, Coach. A two-part question. So, first part, do you work with younger players, like similar to what we had earlier with Jordanis under 12s? And second part is how, because I work with younger guys, and I sort of find it difficult to sort of what details, more or less details, because obviously they need a bit more hips and a bit more power to get the shot up, but sort of how to avoid teaching them bad habits that will, as they grow older, as they assume, because obviously they get older, their bodies get stronger and the shot will change slightly. So sort of how do you tackle shooting with a under 12 or under 10 player?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of resources you have, right? So if you're talking about that young age where they're unable to create the power to score on a 10-foot rim, or the basketball is too big and heavy, if that's what you've got, then their bodies, like, the bodies are really smart. So what a young player would normally do is they would, like, step back, the ball would be low, and then it would be more of a launch like this. Yes, that technically that doesn't look great, but actually the one-part motion that they're creating is giving them the power. And I would not want to change that because there is some value in that. Now, if you can bring the hoops down and you can use a smaller ball, then absolutely, now you're teaching them as you would teach an adult in a 10-foot size hoop. But I would start asking yourself, because if any one of us went to the halfway line or maybe further back and tried to shoot a half-court shot, we're going to shoot like a 7-year-old would try and shoot, right? Because our bodies are trying to create that power. So let them try and create that power if you can't bring the hoop down or the ball is too heavy.
Any other questions?
Cool. In the ball handling there, you treated it as basically an open skill. With the shooting, you treated it as a closed skill. Let's say any one of these players here we watch and we think they could have one or two slight tweaks, perhaps. Are you then doing it like closed block, like you were then? Or are you in lots of, can you get those tweaks doing lots of very random open style?
Depends what the tweak is. Good question. It depends what the tweak is. So if the tweak was about how to catch effectively and efficiently on the move, so they're running, I don't know, corner drift or a wing lift, whatever it is, and they're struggling to get that hand placement correct with the movement, then I would remove the movement. So I would start bringing it down the scale just to simplify it a bit to close that one particular issue. If it's something that they could address, maybe we've worked on it for a while now, and it's just an issue of a reminder, maybe a quick, capture on the phone just to show them, then I would keep it open. Ultimately, we want it to be open as much as possible. But when they're starting to struggle with it in that open setting, it's got to get a little bit more closed just to nail that one thing that's holding them back. Because it can be quite overwhelming, right? The game has lots of things going on. So, that was two very different styles. Some of them weren't getting this. So, if we had more time, I would pull that one to the side and we'd stop the defender, we'd stop the sliding, and it would be a lot slower. So it's constantly doing this depending on what you see.
Any other questions, guys?
Hello, thank you. I wanted to ask about like handling pressure from a defensive standpoint. So I noticed in the drill it's more like offense based. So how would like the defense adjust it to make it both competitive for the defender and the offensive player?
Great question. So if you're asking me about, should we set this up super quick? Should we set this up? Let's get one player with the ball and a defender. And one more as a screener in a side pick and roll. Offense, defense, screener. So the way I would turn this up, so like the dribbling stuff that we saw, the float dribble, it was quite passive, right? But here now we're going to play a game where it's using the pick and roll. You can reject if you want. But if you reject and you get in front of him, you get a point, right? Yeah. If you don't reject and you use the screen, you can only go over because we've got no other things going on here, right? You can only shoot in the mid-range. However, if you choose to go over the screen, but you get there first, you get a point. Got it? Go on then. Excellent. Good shot. So right there, what I've done is I've given the defender a little bit more of a target. He doesn't want to start, he wants to start picking up points. He wants to score these points by not allowing the reject and by getting over the top of the screen. And by tricking him a little bit into working hard, it means that his intensity starts to go up. When his intensity starts to go up, so does his. Yeah? Cool. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, guys. Can we give Gary a hand, please?
Thank you.
So we've just got a couple of minutes. We just need to set up the projector for the next presentation. Just talk amongst yourselves for a couple of minutes.
That was good. Cheers.
Good work, man.
Cheers.
That was lovely. Yeah.
Did you not?